It started with a lost dog. That's the mundane detail I always come back to. It wasn't some grand, ominous beginning, no thunderclap or prophetic dream. It was just a Tuesday afternoon in late October, the air in Humboldt County carrying that specific damp chill that seeps right into your bones, and my girlfriend Chloe's Siberian husky Coda had bolted after a deer. We were on a trail just off the Avenue of the Giants, the kind of place where the redwoods are so massive they seem to swallow sound itself. 1 minute, Coda was trotting ahead of us, his leash dangling from my hand. The next he was a gray and white flash vanishing into the ferns and the perpetual twilight of the forest floor. Coda. God damn it. Chloe's voice was sharp with panic, cutting through the cathedral silence. She took off after him and I followed, my heart already pounding from the sudden sprint. I remember watching her run ahead of me, the way her black leggings clung to the muscles in her calves and thighs, the frantic sway of her hips beneath the oversized gray sweatshirt she'd stolen from me. Even in that moment of panic, a stupid primal part of me noticed how the fabric of the leggings stretched taut across her backside. It was an intrusive thought, immediately followed by a wave of guilt. My girlfriend's dog was lost, and I was checking out her ass. We crashed through the undergrowth for what felt like an hour, our calls for Coda echoing back at us, muffled and distorted by the thick groves. The fog was rolling in, tendrils of white mist snaking between the colossal tree trunks, reducing visibility to just a few dozen feet. The air grew colder, wetter. "We're never going to find him," Chloe gasped, finally stopping, her hands on her knees, her breath plumed in the air. She straightened up, and I saw the tears welling in her eyes, making the deep brown of her irises look like wet stones. Her dark hair was escaping from its messy bun, sticking to her damp forehead. She was beautiful in a way that always felt a little untouchable to me, even after 2 years. There was a sharpness to her cheekbones, a fullness to her lips that I could never quite believe were mine to kiss. Right then she looked fragile, and the desire to protect her got all mixed up with a more basic urge. I wanted to pull her close, to feel her body against mine, to kiss the fear off her mouth. Instead, I just put a hand on her shoulder. "He can't have gone far. He's probably just scared. We'll find him." That's when we saw the man. He was just standing there, about 50 feet away, at the base of a redwood so wide it would take 10 people to circle it. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was simply present. Tall and gaunt, dressed in a dark green waxed canvas jacket that looked decades old, and trousers of a similar vintage. His face was pale and deeply lined, but it was his eyes that got me. They were a pale, watery blue, and they were fixed on us with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. In his arms, quiet and calm, was Coda. "Oh, thank God!" Chloe cried, rushing forward before I could stop her. I followed, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. There was something wrong about the scene. The way the man stood, perfectly still, the absolute silence of the dog in his arms. Coda was a friendly dog, but he was a spaz, always wriggling and licking. Now he was limp, his head resting on the man's arm, his eyes open but dull. "He was wandering," the man said. His voice was dry, raspy, like leaves skittering across pavement. It didn't seem to match the dampness of the forest, seemed lost. "Thank you so much," Chloe said, her voice trembling with relief as she reached for Coda. The man transferred the dog into her arms with a slow, deliberate movement. As he did, his pale eyes flicked from Chloe to me and held my gaze. There was no warmth in them, no recognition of the human transaction that had just occurred. It was a flat, assessing look. "You're a long way from the main path," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Our dog ran off," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We were just heading back." He nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over me, then lingering on Chloe as she cuddled Coda, who was now starting to whimper softly. The man's eyes traced the line of her neck, down to where the collar of my sweatshirt had slipped, revealing a sliver of smooth olive skin. It wasn't a leer, not exactly. It was more clinical, like he was cataloging her. A hot spike of anger shot through me, cutting through the unease. "You should be careful in these woods," the man said, his raspy voice dropping even lower. "Things have a way of getting lost, and sometimes things have a way of being found." He turned without another word and walked away, not back towards the Avenue of the Giants, but deeper into the forest. He moved silently, his form swallowed by the fog and the trees within seconds. It was as if he'd never been there at all. The walk back to the car was quiet, tense. Coda was okay, just spooked. Chloe held him tightly, her face buried in his fur. That I kept my arm around her, my senses on high alert, listening for any sound that wasn't the drip of water from the redwood canopy or our own footsteps on the damp earth that I felt watched. That was weird, right? Chloe said once we were safely inside my Jeep, the heater blasting. That guy. Yeah, I agreed, pulling out onto the empty highway. The fog was thick now, reducing the world to the twin cones of our headlights. Weird. I tried to dismiss it that he was just a reclusive local, a forest ranger, maybe an odd duck. But his words echoed in my head. Asterisk, things have a way of being found. Asterisk, it was 2 days later that Chloe called me, her voice tight with a confusion that bordered on fear. Liam, you're not going to believe this. I was at my apartment in Eureka, trying to focus on a freelance graphic design project. Believe what? The mail just came. There was a package for me. No return address. The postmark is from Garberville, which is like right near where we were hiking. A cold trickle of dread started down my spine. What was in it? It's Mr. Bubbles. I froze. Mr. Bubbles was a tiny, threadbare teddy bear Chloe had had since she was a baby. That she'd lost him on a family camping trip in Humboldt when she was 6. She told me the story once, how devastated she'd been, how her dad had spent hours searching the campsite for it. That's impossible, I said. It has to be a different one. A coincidence. It's him, Liam, she insisted, her voice trembling. I'd know him anywhere. That he's got the same missing button eye, the same stain on his paw from where I dropped him in chocolate milk. It's him. I drove over to her place immediately. She lived in a small, bright cottage in Cutton, surrounded by ferns and pine trees. When I walked in, she was sitting on her couch, clutching the small brown bear. It looked ancient, the fur matted and worn. But it was clean. Too clean for something that had been lying in a forest for over 20 years. She held it out to me. The smell hit me first, not the damp, earthy smell of decay, but a faint, sweet scent, like pipe tobacco and old paper, the same smell I'd caught a hint of when the gaunt man had handed Coda back to us. How? Was all I could manage. I don't know, she whispered, her eyes wide. The package was just a plain brown box. No note. Nothing. Who would do this? Who could possibly have this? I had no answers. We spent the rest of the day in a state of low-grade shock. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe her parents had found it years ago and this was an elaborate, belated prank? But when she called them, her mother's confusion was genuine. She remembered the lost bear vividly, and was as baffled as we were. That night, I stayed at Chloe's. We ordered Thai food and tried to watch a movie, but neither of us could concentrate. The bear sat on her coffee table, its one glass eye seeming to watch us. The sexual tension that was usually a constant, humming undercurrent between us was gone, replaced by a cold dread. When we went to bed, I held her, but it was for comfort, not passion. Her body was tense against mine. I found myself staring at the curve of her shoulder in the moonlight, the way her dark hair fanned out across the pillow. Normally, the sight would stir something in me, a possessive warmth. Now, it just made me feel vulnerable. The beauty of her felt like a liability, a beacon that had attracted this attention. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by the sound of Coda growling. A low, guttural sound from the foot of the bed. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. What is it, boy? Chloe murmured, stirring beside me. I shushed her, listening. The house was silent except for the dog's growl. Then I heard it, a faint rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape from outside. Like someone dragging a branch along the side of the house. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slid out of bed and crept to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. The fog had returned, a solid wall of white. I couldn't see more than a few feet into her yard. The scraping sound stopped. Then, a moment later, it started again, closer now. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the front door. I grabbed the baseball bat she kept by the bed, a souvenir from her brief, ill-advised softball phase, and moved quietly down the hallway. Coda followed, his growl now a quiet rumble. Chloe was right behind me, her hand gripping the back of my t-shirt. The living room was dark. The scraping had stopped. The only sound was our own ragged breathing. I peered through the peephole in the front door. Nothing but fog. Then I looked down. Lying on the welcome mat was a small rectangular object of Vita's tape. The kind no one had used in 20 years. It had a handwritten label on it, the letters neat and precise. It read, Liam, age 9. My blood ran cold. I unlocked the door and snatched the tape up, quickly locking it again. My hands were shaking. Chloe turned on a lamp. We both stared at the tape. It was a standard Memorex tape, the label yellowed with age. What is that? Chloe asked, her voice small. I don't know, I said, but I was lying. A memory, distant and fragmented, was tugging at the edges of my mind. A summer trip to the redwoods. Me, age 9. My family, do you have a VCR? I asked, already knowing the answer. Nobody had a VCR. No, of course not. Liam, what's going on? I couldn't answer. The feeling of being watched was back, so intense it felt like a pressure in the room. I went to the window and looked out again. The fog was impenetrable, but for a single heart-stopping second, I thought I saw a tall, gaunt silhouette standing at the edge of the tree line. Then it was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I drove to a thrift store in Eureka and found a dusty VCR for $10. I brought it back to my apartment, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I felt like I was bringing something contaminated into my home. I hooked it up to my old TV with trembling fingers. Chloe had insisted on coming with me. She sat on my couch, knees drawn up to her chest, watching me. She was wearing a tight, faded Smith's t-shirt and jeans, and despite the fear coiling in my gut, I couldn't help but notice the way the fabric stretched across her chest, the outline of her bra visible beneath. The contrast was jarring, nauseating almost. My brain was screaming in terror, and yet some ancient, stupid part of it was still registering the swell of her breasts. I felt a flush of shame. I pushed the tape into the VCR. The screen fizzed with black and white static, then resolved into a shaky home movie image. The colors were oversaturated, the picture grainy. It was a video of my 9th birthday party. I recognized the backyard of my childhood home in Sacramento. There I was, a scrawny kid with a bad bowl cut, grinning wildly as I ripped wrapping paper off a present. It was a specific present. A remote-controlled monster truck, bright red. I'd loved that truck. I'd driven it for hours until the battery died. The camera panned around the yard, showing my parents, younger, smiling. My older sister, rolling her eyes. It was a normal home video. Then the camera swung back to me. I was holding the truck, beaming. And then I did something I had completely forgotten. I turned and ran towards the large oak tree at the back of the yard. I crouched down and shoved the truck into a hollow at the base of the tree, hiding it. The memory crashed over me. I'd hidden it because my cousin, a destructive little jerk, was coming over later and I didn't want him to break it. But then, I'd forgotten about it. I'd never retrieved it. We moved away from that house a year later. The truck was still there, rotting in that hollow. I'd never told anyone about hiding it. No one. The video ended, dissolving back into static. Chloe and I sat in silence for a full minute. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. How? She finally whispered, echoing my question from 2 days before. I don't know, I said, my voice hoarse. That was a private memory. No one else knew about that. The man, she said, the man in the woods. He's doing this. It wasn't a question. We both knew. The following week was a special kind of hell. The paranoia was constant, a low-grade fever humming in my veins. Every creak of my apartment floorboards, every car that drove by too slowly, was a potential threat. I started seeing him everywhere. A tall figure in a crowd on the Eureka boardwalk that vanished when I blinked. The glimpse of a dark green jacket in the rearview mirror. It was always just a trick of the light, a case of mistaken identity, but each time, my heart would stutter and freeze. My work suffered. I couldn't concentrate. My interactions with Chloe became strained. The sexual attraction was still there, but it was now twisted, poisoned by fear. One night, we were trying to have a normal evening, cooking dinner together in her cottage. She was bending over to get a pot from a lower cabinet, and the sight of her jeans tightening around her hips, the graceful curve of her spine, sent a jolt of pure, unwanted arousal through me. It was immediately followed by a wave of revulsion. How could I feel desire when we were being stalked by some thing that pulled lost memories from the earth? I felt like my own body was betraying me. I turned away abruptly, pretending to be engrossed in chopping an onion. She noticed. What's wrong? Nothing, I mumbled. It's not nothing, Liam, that you've been distant, you flinch when I touch you. I'm just on edge, Chloe. Wouldn't you be? She came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist, resting her cheek against my back. The warmth of her body, the soft pressure of her breasts against me, was both comforting and agonizing. I wanted to spin around, to lose myself in her, to fuck this fear away. But I also wanted to push her away, to build a wall between us so that whatever was coming for me wouldn't get to her. We'll get through this, she whispered. But I wasn't sure we would. The next intrusion was more direct. I was working late at my apartment, the blue light of my computer screen the only illumination. My phone, lying face down on the desk, buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. The message contained a single image. It was a photograph, slightly blurry, taken through a window. It was a photo of me and Chloe, asleep in her bed from the night before. You could see the shape of our bodies under the covers, the outline of her head on the pillow next to mine. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the image, my skin crawling. He'd been outside her window. He'd been watching us sleep. I typed back, my fingers clumsy with terror. Asterisk, who is this? What do you want? Asterisk, the response was immediate. 3 words. Asterisk, I collect lost things. Asterisk, then, another message. An address. It was a remote location deep in Humboldt Redwood State Park, coordinates for a place not on any map. I knew what it was. An invitation. Or a summons. I didn't tell Chloe about the photo. I couldn't. The violation was too profound, too intimate. Showing her would have made it real in a way I couldn't handle. I became obsessed with the coordinates. I pulled them up on satellite imagery. It showed nothing but an unbroken canopy of green. I spent hours staring at that patch of digital forest, as if I could divine its secrets through the screen. The compulsion to go there was like an itch deep inside my skull.